I wanted to talk to you guys about this last week, and we ran out of time. And I want a couple other things I want to do, but I want to talk about some test taking strategies. So for you, what this is it's designed to help kind of make the test a little bit easier for you to take, so that you can possibly pass it, with at least a minimum score. Um, you maybe you're shooting for a high score. This is designed to teach you, the bare minimum and try to get that 145. But after studying the test, we took so many of them, we kind of came up with these tips, okay? And so some of this stuff I've already mentioned, and I'm going to speed through it. I don't want to beat a dead horse, as they say. But please, this is on page 91 of the syllabus. And if you get a chance later, unless you got it right now, go ahead and look through this. But I already gave you the 50% rule, which is that if you pass 50% of the questions on a test, I don't care what test you're taking, math, science, social studies, or language arts, you will pass that test. That's important because it gives you a strategy of you do not have to even look at all the questions. Although I recommend that you do, when you're taking the test, if you see one that's extremely difficult and confusing, just guess, flag it, and move on. Don't waste your time. And the reason is, as you may already know, the test is timed. You only have so much time. As I told you, the essay is 45 minutes. That's it, total. So what I did was I created this chart for you so you can see approximately how much time you have per question based on the type of question. So given what they stated to me, the GED people, you're going to have about 46 questions. And with 92 minutes, you're looking at about 2 minutes per question on parts 1 and 2. So as you're taking parts 1 and 2, because I'm sorry, I said that wrong, parts 1 and 3. Part 2 of the language arts is the essay. So parts 1 and 3, 2 minutes per question. So when you're on question 1 and you're sitting there and you're thinking, and it's, 2 minutes goes by, 2.5 minutes, and you're still thinking, the half minutes that you go into over the 2 minutes for that first question now has to come from somewhere. So you've now lost 30 seconds, half a minute on the next question. So it's very important you're aware of what you're doing in terms of the questions and the amount of time. You cannot use too much time on one question. And I think, again, I told you, you only need to complete half of the questions to pass. So that's why I say to you, have a strategy. Ones that are difficult, just guess, flag it. I don't know if you've ever taken a practice test. I will try to do one before we leave today if we have time. You flag it and you move on. Guess, flag it, move on. And then at the end, if you have time, you can go back, and the flagged ones you could double check. But don't waste time on ones you don't really understand, or that you don't have. It takes too much time for you to do. It's not worth it, because there are going to be easy problems, medium problems, and hard problems, and each one is worth the same 1 point. So theoretically, you'd want to answer all the easy ones and maybe some of the moderate ones and skip the rest of the moderate and all the hard ones. Unfortunately, they don't tell you what's hard, what's easy, what's middle of the road or moderate. So you have to use your brain and think fast. So again, language arts, 2 minutes. Social studies, 2 minutes, 35 questions. Science, a little more complicated. They understand that. About 34 problems that you're looking at about 2.65 minutes per question. And in the math, you're looking at about 2.5 minutes per question. And the math is probably, I would assume with all of you, is probably the most fearsome thing you have, or it's the most feared subject. Now, here's the thing. There is, with the math, you have to have prior knowledge. You have to know how to do the problems. The science, social studies, they do not, for the most part, you do not have to have prior knowledge. They won't ask you what's MC squared for science. They won't ask you that. They know if they did, most people would fail miserably. They don't ask you in social studies, who's the 16th president, Lincoln. They don't ask you that. They'll still give you something that Lincoln said and then ask you a question about it. So keep that in mind. Social studies and science they don't require prior knowledge. They give you readings that are science related. You answer the questions. But math, you got to know the material. Language arts, you obviously have to know how to read, reason, and come to conclusions, answer questions, and of course, write. All right. I don't want to go over all these. Please take the time. I'm telling you guys, this is tested over, and for me personally, I've probably taken 200 plus practice tests, me personally. 10 or 11 out of 15, I think we passed, guessing. And so, why do I tell you that? It's not to suggest just guess and you'll pass. I'm not suggesting that. But it's just a test, guys. Don't be afraid of it. They've created an algorithm, and look at it like a game. You're gonna win the game. If you get a 145 or higher. Look at this stuff, look it over. And I'm sharing with you some of the things I picked up on. After a while, things start clicking and I start seeing patterns. And so, like with language arts, and I've had other people tell me this, who have taken the test, that, generally you'll have questions that are grouped similarly. So, a cat and a dog, they're real animals, right? And a Bigfoot and a werewolf are like cryptid, possibly make-believe. So that's another way. So here's the thing, and I discussed it here, if you know that Bigfoot is a wrong answer, what I learned is that generally that grouping then is wrong. So if you know Bigfoot's wrong, werewolf's going to be wrong too. So it's either A or B. Remember that. I don't know why they do it that way. It's just what I've noticed. I've taken so many tests, I pick up on that stuff. And then with language arts, sometimes they'll have hair splitters. I call them hair splitters. Think of a piece of hair and you're trying to split it. The answers are so close. So be aware of that. In that case, you really got to go with the best answer. And it's not always the case, but I have run into some problems where, I have to study it and I'm like, wow, I don't know. And then you just got to go with what you think is the best answer. Generally speaking, the answers will be pretty clear, which one's correct and which one are not. Okay. Science. I told you earlier, I get sweaty and nervous and stuff when I take the science test. And if we do one, when we get down to like week 6, 7, 8, if you're still here, I hope you are. That's when I start doing not just language arts practice tests with you. We'll do it as a group online here. I'll do science, I'll do math, we'll do social studies to give you guys practice tests in the other areas as well. The first 4 or 5 weeks will be basically language arts though. But one thing I learned, and I learned it through being fearful, is I would see these questions that would say, you may use your calculator. And when I see that statement, I'm like, oh my God, this is a monster of a problem. I could barely use a calculator. There's no way I'm going to get this one right. And what I'm telling you is usually that's a trick. It's a ruse. It's a smoke screen to get you nervous, to make you think this is a really tough question. Oh my God, I better, think carefully and so on. And so what I'm telling you is it's probably a trick, and you don't need your calculator. And it's probably a logic type question. And they'll throw up like, and I'm sorry I don't have examples, but if we get to it, if you're with me in 5 or 6 weeks, we'll do this and you'll see what I mean. But they'll give you like have a chemical formula up there, and you're thinking, oh my God, I don't even know what that says. HCl, what the hell is that? And it turns out, well, you don't even need to know what that is. See, that's where they trick you. They think you have to have that prior knowledge of the table of elements, and you don't. And it has nothing to do with that. And then they throw that phrase, you may use your calculator, and you're thinking, oh my God. So I'm saying to you, when you run into that kind of a problem that says you may use your calculator, it's probably a logical question that you can do on your own without using a calculator. Excuse me. If worse comes to worse, and this is with any test you're taking, you can always work backwards. You can plug answers in and see if they work. That's really good with math, by the way. But understand that that's time consuming. And I would really only do that once I've gone through and answered the ones that I know or have a confidence that I'm probably right. So the ones that I've flagged, that I've now gone back to do, that's where I would use the technique of working backwards or plugging answers in where possible. Now, you probably, or you may not know this, I don't know, maybe you do know this, but some of the answers will be fill in the blank, and those you have to know. You cannot guess on those. See, they take away the guessing element, the odds of guessing correctly by having you do fill in the blank questions. There's nothing you can do with that. If you don't know, you don't know. And then they have what's called drop down, but those are like an A, B, C, D. You click, and then there's 4 answers that drop down. Social studies. I've always said, it's in my syllabus near the bottom, probably social studies for most of you will be the easiest. And it's because you've been social studied to death since kindergarten, in your schooling. And so I would say to you, you probably have the least the fear from social studies. However, be aware, if you're weak at reading graphs, like those graphs we had up above with the essay, and if you're not a good reader, then you might have a problem. I could almost guarantee, though, you guys are today, with the technology the way it is, computers, the iPhone, you name it. You're probably all very good readers. You just don't realize it, because everything we do today is reading. Think about it. Everything you do is reading. So you cannot say to yourself, I'm a terrible reader, if every day you're reading. I mean, you're going to pick up the skill, So that being said, you probably fear language arts tests more than you should, because the one test that you probably are absolutely prepared for, with the exception of the essay, is the language arts, because you read every day. I mean, how many of you guys are doing this every day? You're like this with your phone every day, looking at your phone. That's what you do. So that skill of reading, making inferences, coming to conclusions, you do that every day. All right, so social studies is probably, and there's always an exception, but it's probably the easiest. Then I would say probably in order of difficulty, the next test that is least difficult, social studies being the easiest, I think probably science, and then probably language arts, and then probably math for most would be the most difficult. Now, math. Of all the tests I've taken, I've studied this the most, believe it or not, even though I'm the language arts guy. Because when our workshops were originally structured where all taught everything within our workshop. And as a result of that way we used to teach as opposed to now, guess what we spent 80% of our time on? It was the math, because the students really needed that. So I took the most practice tests in math, no question about it. And so here's what I learned. With math, absolutely, always read the question first. Do not read whatever they give you and then read the question. You probably could do that in language arts. Read the story and then do the questions. Don't do that with math, because I noticed that they will have these long-winded problems that will take literally a minute to read and understand before you even get to the problem. And the information may have very little or nothing to do with the question. So remember that. In math, you always read the question first and work backwards, okay? And like with language arts, I noticed that they tend to group, I can't say 100%, they tend to group the questions by similarity. And so notice A and B. Do you see the similarity between A and B? And the similarity between C and D. Do you see that? It's pretty clear. This A and B are a lower value. C and D are much larger. So the rule is for you, make a note of this. When you take the math, same thing. If A is wrong and B is similar, A and B are probably both wrong. I can't explain why that is, but that's just what I've found. You can always work backwards. Now, I would recommend, again, I've said this, go through, and I'll get into a strategy with you in a couple minutes. Go through the ones that you know, guess on the ones that you don't know, flag those, and then go back. And the ones that you don't know, the ones that have been flagged, now you could use the working backwards strategy of plugging in information, And I worked with this guy, he's now retired. A lot of what I know, I learned from him, so I honor him. I call him the math guru, and he's helped us with our knowledge of the math on GED. But he used to teach AP, advanced placement math, for like 20 years. So he's very used to and understands how these kinds of tests work. But basically, here's his advice to you. He says, don't waste your time on any one problem. Do the problems that you know how to do first, then go back and do the harder ones at the end, and then utilize guessing at that point. Okay. And I give you this is my advice to you when you're taking the test and you answer a question and you feel pretty good about it, forget about it and move on. Don't second guess yourself. Don't second guess yourself. The reason is it's probably they've studied this, way your brain works, it's probably the correct answer. If you go back and change it, you're probably going to get it wrong. Also, perhaps you've noticed this when you're taking a test. This is significant. This is psychological. If you're reading the question and automatically, A pops into your head, that's probably the right answer. If you start thinking it's B and you get confused, go with A or go with the original answer that you came up with. Give your brain credit. Your brain is you're smart. You can do it. But listen to your brain. Listen to your conscious and subconscious when it's talking to you. You're reading that problem, it says C. Maybe that's the answer. And if you get confused, stick with C. That's what your brain told you is the answer. Okay. Couple more minutes, guys, and we'll be done. I want to just share this with you. We studied probably 50 math tests alone, him and I. And what we did, this is significant, guys. This is, I think, pretty important. We took 65 questions and we analyzed them and we wrote down, well, what are they asking you in this question? And here's what we came up with. And so this number means out of 65 questions, one question was about what's called absolute value. One was about the area of a triangle. Okay. Now notice these, the highlighted ones. 3 problems out of 65 were converting words or expressions to an equation, like, Joey has 3 eggs. His sister gave him 3 more. How many eggs does he have in total? And you would write 3 + 3 = 6. You're converting words to an equation. Now, you might say, wow, 3 problems, that's nothing. Well, not necessarily. 10% of 65 problems would be 6.5. 5% would be 3.25. So what I'm telling you is converting words to expressions, that's about 5% of your test. They're word problems. You have to know these. That's 5%. Now, if you're really good at them, great. If you're weak at word problems, I'm telling you, this list here I've given you, I would study the highlighted ones that you don't know, because that's where the bulk of the questions are. Distribution, a squared, 2x times the quantity 3 + 7 equals, you have to distribute 4. That's over 5% of the problems are distribution. If you don't know how to do that, go on YouTube, Google it. Make sure you know how to do this. That's a significant amount of questions on the test. Graphing is 10%, 6 out of 65. That's almost 10% are graphing. And by the way, I've seen this with my own eyes. I've had kids tell me this. This is accurate. Okay, so you need to be aware. So, okay, so there's a 1 factoring problem. I wouldn't get all bent out of shape out of that, with that. 5 formula problems, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I would try to understand those. I would take the time to try to study that, yes. because that's basically almost 10% of all the problems on a test. Function, inequalities, if you don't know what these are, you need to look them up, because 3, that would be about 5%, a little more than 5%, 6% of the test. You need to know this stuff. Order of operations, proportion, more graphing, standard word problems. Excuse me. So I created this so that you guys can see the types of math problems that you really should focus in on more than others. If you have nothing but time on your hands and you've given up the Kardashians, you don't watch it anymore, then by all means, look them all up. If you don't, use the whole thing. But if your time is limited, which I'm guessing it is, by the way, the Kardashians, that was a joke, but if you time is limited, I'm guessing you have a job, family, whatever, and you don't have a lot of time, this is designed to focus you in so you're not on a wild goose chase for the math. And this, if you study these highlighted ones, you're going to do pretty well on that test and pass it. Okay. Here is a test taking strategy I'm going to share with you, and then we'll be done for the night. I've alluded to it. I've talked about it. Remember that we passed about 11 out of 15 tests just guessing, and I don't recommend that, but I share that with you just so you understand. It's just a test. Yeah. So here is my XYZ strategy. If you go in and you're nervous, this is if you're nervous, you're not really sure what to do. Step 1 is answer those questions that you feel somewhat confident about or pretty confident. Yes, and move on. Okay? Don't second guess yourself. Just move on. Step 2, you're looking at questions that you're not sure or you don't have a clue. It's beyond you. Basically, answer these questions, but flag them. It's a little thing that you click on. It's a flag, and you click on it. At the end of the test, you'll be able to go back if you have time and look at those flagged questions. But the ones that you're not sure, you don't feel good about it, you don't have a clue, you have no idea, guess and move on. Now, when you're done, go back and double check the flagged ones, the I'm not sure ones, and the I have no clue ones, and then just kind of work those if you have time, and look at the problems. Eliminate, if there's an ABCD problem, eliminate the obvious ones that you think don't work. If you have a question, you have no clue, sometimes you can count the words or the letters and go with the shorter one, because generally speaking, the answer is going to be the shorter answer. And it sounds crazy, but it does work sometimes. I would not rely on that method, but if you have nothing that's working and you have no clue, count the words. This one has 5 words, the next one is 7, the next one 9. Generally go with the one that's shortest. Now, here's the last thing I want to share with you before we leave. I call this the ABCD strategy. This is based on when we passed 11 out of 15 tests guessing. It's called the ABCD strategy. What you do is you go through, and 1 is A, 2 is B. So you sit down, they say go. 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C, 4 is D, 5 is A, 6 is B, 7 is C, 8 is D, and you keep repeating. If there are fill in the blanks, you can skip those and maintain your pattern of A, B, C, D. Okay. So A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. Skip the fill in the blanks or the drop downs. You can skip those. If you have if you have a drop down though, you could use the drop down. The first one is A, second one B, and so on. Although we didn't necessarily do that. To be true to form, just use the ABCD method only on the questions that have ABCD as an answer. Once you've done that, you've done the whole test, ABCD. Now you go back and you review all the questions that you've marked. And so, you know, you could now see you've answered all the questions and you're cool. You've done everything and you probably did it in just a few minutes, say 3-4 minutes. And now you just go back and you're going to look at each question and quickly ask yourself, am I pretty confident about this? Is this the right answer? No, it's not. I think it's this, and change it. And then go to B. And then go to 2 and do the same thing. But the ones that you don't have any clue, just leave the answer that's there. Okay. And lastly, especially in language arts, I say this to students, complete all order of events questions where they'll say what came first, what came second, what came third. And the reason is those questions, even though it's like question 7, and it's you're moving these boxes around, you know, you're moving these boxes around and plopping them into these squares. That one question is, let's say it has 4 boxes. That one question is worth 4 questions because it has 4 boxes, it has 4 answers. Remember that. Always try to do those questions that are like order the events. Number 1, they're worth a lot, maybe 4 or 5 questions worth. Number 2, I can tell you, order of events is simple. You just look and you can visually tell what came first, what came second. They're always easy to do. They just take a little bit of time.